So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this webinar from the Intercollegiate Horse Shows Association. My name is Kelly Frankfort. I am the Vice President of the Intercollegiate Horse Shows Association. I thank you for taking the time to participate, and this webinar is being recorded, so should anybody have to drop off or you know someone that was unable to participate at this time, go ahead and we'll be sharing that link afterwards, probably tomorrow. We know that there are a lot of questions and uncertainty about the upcoming season for the Intercollegiate. I am also a coach. I coach the Rutgers University team here in New Jersey. So I understand that there are a lot of questions. Hopefully we're going to answer those here today. And there will be an opportunity at the end to ask some additional questions. Today's webinar, I'm going to run through a presentation that'll run 20 to 25 minutes. In the background, we have Sherry West, the IHSA National Steward, and Cricket Morris, the IHSA National Secretary, that'll be answering some of those questions live. But at the end, we'll have an opportunity to answer some questions that apply to the broad base population. And so we'll do that at the conclusion of this webinar. So our primary concerns as we've looked to this year, obviously first and foremost, is to prioritize the health and safety of all of our IHSA members, coaches, and alumni. We have tried to provide a path to return to competition, offering flexibility at the regional level, and that'll be a theme as we go through this presentation. We also acknowledge that there are differences in participation that exist across the association. The effect of this pandemic has varied across the country, so we're just seeing differences in the way that different schools are reacting to it. We also accept the fluidity of this situation. There is things changing. We would have never thought we would have been where we are if you had asked us in March, still here in July. So we know things are going to change. So this is a presentation talking about where we are at this point in time. So in terms of health and safety measures, we would like to say a huge thank you to the IEA. With their support and inspiration from the protocols that they put out to their membership, we've created the IHSA COVID-19 protocols and best practices. This document has been emailed out to all our coaches and captains and teams and schools, but it also is available on the IHSA website. You see the two locations there. We really encourage you to share these with your institutions to show that we're addressing the situation. Obviously, should you get some horse shows going in your region, the state and city and your schools, whatever protocols that they have put into place, those are, whichever one is more stringent, which is stronger, that is obviously going to take precedent. We know there's going to be challenges, and that's just some of the things your schools are looking at, but please share this document with them to know that we are thinking about your safety and how we return to play. So we recognize that there's going to be some accommodations that are going to be needed. We've seen it on the USEF and the USHJA side. What we are doing is allowing the regions to have the option to do what's best for their area. Overall, any accommodations are going to be applied out of necessity and not convenience. And those regions must appeal to the executive committee for any accommodations. So again, it is going to be the regional presidents that are going to be responsible for putting together the accommodation plan and appealing to the executive committee for whatever accommodations those might be. So I'd like to do is kind of run through like 6 or 7 scenarios of rules, specifically highlighting the rules that might need to be adjusted for the regions, and show you what that season might look like. So obviously, perfect world, all the schools in your region are in session and are able to attend competitions. We know this is highly unlikely, but the hope is that, yes, you might have the opportunity in some cases to continue as normal, but we realize that chances of that are quite slim. So one potential scenario is where you have the majority of the schools are sessioned in in session and are able to compete, but there are some that are closed and are not going to be able to compete for that whole year. And this could affect the rule 4200, where we talk about needing to have a minimum of 3 colleges to compete to make it an official regular show. So a region can consider applying for accommodations to rule 4200 to either adjust how many colleges you would need or what percentage of the riders entering that horse show. So that would be the rule that that regional president would look to. One third scenario, in this case, which I think maybe end up happening quite a lot, is where the schools in the region stay online for the fall semester and return to in-person classes in the spring, meaning we would only have a spring season for the IHSA. So in this case, the accommodation may have to look at Rule 1601A, where you're talking about needing to have a specific number of horse shows to have a viable season. So in that case, usually the minimum is 5 horse shows, maybe because you only have a spring show that you can only get 4 horse shows in. So that would be an accommodation that the regional president could appeal for. The other thing that could happen is if you had a shortened season like that, is you may need to apply for lowering of points for open and alumni riders. And this would be per Rule 7207. In this case, we know both open and alumni riders in both disciplines start off at 0 points and accumulate points as the year goes on. So we may need to lower those. So that would be something the regional president could apply for an accommodation for. Kind of in the same vein as that one is if schools happen to be in session in fall. We are hearing of some schools that are bringing their students back early. So it may be that you have competitions, you're able to put some horse shows together in the fall, but then perhaps we see a resurgence of the pandemic and the schools don't go back in session for the spring. So in that case, it would be the same 2 rules that the regional president could look to get an accommodation for. That 1601A with the number of horse shows you needed, or again, dropping the points for the open and alumni riders per Rule 7207. So that's another potential option. Now we start looking into asking our regional presidents to be creative. Perhaps you have a situation where not all the schools in the region can compete in all the fall or all the spring shows. Maybe there are some travel restrictions. We have many regions that encompass more than one state, and some schools are being told that they can't travel out of state. So you could have the option where a regional president could appeal for accommodations. In this case, it would be 7502A. So normally the high point team is calculated, accumulating points over all of the horse shows. Maybe if you have teams that not all the teams can go to all the horse shows, maybe you ask, can we count the best 3 of the shows in the region towards that high point team? So that again is an accommodation the regional president would look to appeal for. Again, because you'd have that restriction and maybe riders aren't getting to compete in as many shows, you could look to reduce the points for open and alumni riders. Again, that's 7207. Now maybe you have a more dire situation. You do not have enough schools in your region that are either open or will allow their riders to travel to competitions. So again, there's a couple things here you could look at. The region could combine with another region just for this upcoming year. Ideally, we would want them to stay within the zone so that we can kind of manage those situations. If a school did move to another region, that shift would only count for this upcoming competition year. It would not, and then hopefully the next year you would go back to your regular region. There is also a possibility, we know we have some smaller regions, particularly out in the western part of the country, where we may need to look for an accommodation to that Rule 2103A and B. So this is the one that requires a certain number of members, either Hunter seat or Western, to make the region viable. Again, if we don't have enough schools participating and geography doesn't allow you to join another region because it's a plane ride away, this is something your regional president could look at and potentially appeal for. Obviously, we know we may not have thought of everything, that there's so many other situations that may exist out there as schools are evaluating how they're going to bring students back and how they're going to either return to competition. So we asked the region to kind of be creative and come up with a way to get as many schools and riders back in the ring as possible. The goal here is to find a path for teams that are able to compete to have the opportunity to participate in horse shows. We don't want to penalize you because you happen to be in a region where nobody's competing. So we're trying to find creative ways to make that happen. So just some reminders on these accommodations. So they would be applied out of, again, necessity and not convenience. There would be no lowering of points for individual riders in hunter seat classes introductory, novice, limit, or intermediate, nor in the Western classes beginner, rookie, level 1, or level 2. Only accommodations that are officially approved by the executive committee would apply, and all competitions must comply with state and local COVID-19 regulations and protocols. So again, we're going to keep hammering that home. The health and welfare of our members is paramount, so you need to make sure that anybody that's considering hosting a show is well aware of the situation in their part of the country, and you have the tools that the IHSA has provided. So what can you, as a coach, as a rider, as maybe a team captain, what can you do right now? First of all, reach out to your regional presidents and share the status of your school and the team for your upcoming season. They are going to need documentation of what your school's restrictions are. Can you not travel out of state? You're not allowed to compete in the fall, but hopefully in the spring. So they're going to need that documentation. And I know currently regional presidents are hosting those coaches and captains meetings. So make sure you participate in those and you stay aware with what's happening in your part of the country. If you do not know who your regional president is, which is always possible, if you're a rider and you're trying to keep that team going this year, here's the link to where there's IHSA leadership information, your contact information for all the regional presidents in the country. So just so that you're aware of the steps to appeal for accommodations, again, we said regional presidents are meeting with their member schools to collect all this information on their ability to participate and host competitions. We have asked that by a majority vote, the region will determine their best plan for the season. So again, can't stress this enough, that you reach out to your regional presidents and you're connected and in contact with them. Regional presidents will then coordinate with their respective zone chairs to review the plan prior to, there's an appeal form that the regional presidents will be completing. Now, this is primarily because we want to try and we've allowed this flexibility at the regional level, and the zone chairs need to know what's happening in their part of the country so that we're aware, and if there's any schools that have to move between regions, again, ideally we want that to stay within the zone. The regional president must complete the appeal form and submit it to the national secretary. Again, this is going to need all that documentation that we've asked you to supply to your regional president, so that the executive committee has the ability to look at that accommodation fairly. We ask them to submit this form as soon as they can, but ideally by September 1st, and no later than 3 weeks before the first horse show scheduled in that region. So we know that the situation is fluid. We know that things are changing and that schools are making decisions, but that is the deadline that we would like to work with. Then the executive committee will review that application as soon as possible, and then we'll let the regional president and zone chair know of any decisions or what the final decision is. We will work with the website committee, so if you're concerned about points transferring, if you move out of a region, we'll take care of that on our side to make sure that any teams that are shifting or points that have been lowered, that is seamless to you as a participant. So at this point, what we need you to do is try and stay connected with your regional president. Follow the IHSA on social media for any updates. You know, this is, we know that we do not have all the answers now. This presentation was shared with the IHSA Board of Directors last week, and a lot of good questions came up during those presentations, which we are still in the process of evaluating. We know questions have come up about eligibility. That's one of the issues that we are going to be addressing in the coming days. But what can you do is stay connected with us. Watch for announcements on how to keep your team engaged with the IHSA. We know it's going to be a year like no other, but we are going to try and provide as much opportunity to keep your students engaged in the IHSA model. So we will be having some announcements about virtual IHSA horse shows. This could be an option if your team is unable to travel. We will also be doing the IHSA Horsemanship Challenge that may be expanded, again, giving your students something to work on and provide some year-end reward for. We are always coming up with new sponsored discounts. Please stay connected. If as members of the IHSA, you are eligible for a lot of sponsored discounts, so please check those out on our websites, as well as you're eligible for the scholarships and academic recognition that come at the end of the year. So basically stay in touch. There's more information coming. We're going to be announcing here shortly an exciting new class added to our Western slate of classes, so look for that. So there's definitely things happening, and your executive committee and your board is working hard to make sure that we provide those opportunities for you. So that is the end of this presentation. Like I said, this is going to be saved. What I'm going to do is bring in Sherry West. She is our IHSA National Steward, to see if we encourage you to post any questions that you may have. Let me just make sure. I know, so feel free to add any questions that you have in that Q&A box on the screen, and we can answer them. Trying to see if there are any.
So Kelly, are you ready for me to talk?
Yes, go ahead and come in. I was trying to, newbie to the webinar, I'm trying to make you so that we can see you on screen. So if you can make yourself visible, that would be great.
Okay. I think you've stopped me, so I can't, it says.
I can't seem to figure it out. Okay. All right, I may have to just answer the question. For whatever reason, this is not letting me.
I mean, I can talk. They can
Okay.
hear me, I think,
Okay.
hopefully.
So do you want to address any of the questions that
Absolutely, absolutely. So we've had several questions so far. And so I'd like to go ahead and just take the opportunity to answer these questions. And before doing that, a couple of the questions have to do with eligibility. So I just wanted to quickly explain what sort of eligibility riders in the IHSA have available to them. So when riders join the IHSA, when you do that online membership application, that's going to record your anniversary date. And from that date, riders are going to have a 5-year period in which they can utilize 8 semesters of eligibility. You know, if your school is in the quarter system, obviously the number isn't 8, but you know, for most schools, they're working through semesters. And so riders have 8 semesters during a 5-year period. So if you're taking that 5 years in school, you could have a study abroad semester, you could have a semester maybe when things were a little bit tough, and still be able to participate. So with that said, with a couple of the questions that we've had submitted so far, will those riders qualified for regionals this year in 2020 be allowed to come back, including seniors who just graduated, and compete at the level they qualified for this coming year, so for the spring 2021 season? We, as a board of directors, have voted against that. And for the simple fact that there, at this stage of the game, so many variables that we just are unable to even fathom. We don't know exactly what our fall semester is going to look like. We are not sure what the spring semester is going to look like. And as much as all of us as coaches and trying to provide opportunities for our students and everyone else in the IHSA, we just felt like that was not something that we could fairly do. And that in order for us, especially with those seniors that have graduated, we have a significant liability concern for having people competing who aren't members of the university and therefore covered under our liability policy. So no, so right now the students, we did have a vote that the students that qualified for postseason in the spring of 2020 will not have the opportunity to come back and compete in 2021 as they would in 2020. Next question, will riders be unable to, will riders who are unable to show this year, those that have online classes or travel restrictions, etc., will they be given an extra year of eligibility? And that is a question that remains unanswered. We, as an executive committee and an entire board of directors, want to be as fair and equitable with everyone as we possibly can. But again, to reiterate, there are so many variables right now on how many schools are going to have the ability to compete this fall or compete in the spring. We are unsure of exactly what our competition season is going to look like. We're cautiously optimistic that COVID will calm down a little bit and we'll be able to return to some semblance of normal. So we'll have to play the wait and see game a little bit to see if any sort of eligibility is going to be extended. That is one of the questions that came out of our board of directors webinars that we did last week. More questions. What if I have a rider qualify for regionals? I guess this is coming from a coach in the fall semester, and then my school goes to online only for the spring semester. Does that rider have to forfeit the opportunity to ride at regionals? Will they lose those 36 points, get thrown up to the next division for the following school year and just have to deal with it? I'm worried that my rider is investing a lot of their time, personal money, and commitment not to be able to ride at a regional championship. Again, that's one of those questions. I think all of us want to do our very best to provide opportunities for students and to be as fair and as equitable with everyone as we possibly can. And so making adjustments to those points, providing opportunities for them to compete in the future are all things that are being discussed and considered, again, in order to be as fair and equitable to everyone as possible. We will have to stay tuned to see exactly how things shake out. There's just so many variables right now that we can't make a definitive answer on that. Next question, will IHSA Nationals be moved out of New York to a show venue that could be outside, just like the Penn National and Washington International have been? That is another one of those questions that right now we simply do not have an answer for. And especially as COVID guidelines are recommending that the opportunity to be able to provide spaces outside and fresh air, that will certainly be a consideration that our executive committee and entire board of directors takes into consideration as we plan for our spring semester and that 2021 IHSA National Championship. The next question that we answered that one. The next question is,
You want me to take that one about the new Western class?
perfect.
So the question came in: with the uncertainty of the season, why would you add the new Western class this year? Would it hurt to hold off for a year? So this is something that, you should see an announcement in the next day or so, adding ranch riding. This is something that slots in above the reining division. And this had been run as in a trial basis in a couple regions in our country, and with quite success. And the Western Committee felt really strongly that this kind of fills a hole and also generates a lot of enthusiasm amongst our Western riders to add this additional division. So the board was supportive of adding that there's some regions that have already, they're excited to have it in their slate of classes. And we wanted to continue to offer some good news and some things to entice people to participate in the horse shows this year. So this came with the full support of our Western Committee and all of our esteemed Western coaches. And so we're excited to have that option, and it's not required, but have that at the availability for our Western teams.
Okay, the next question comes in: will the institutions have a vote on which course of action their region will take? Absolutely. This is the steps for regions to appeal for accommodation. Regional presidents are the ones who will be working with the zone chairs to fill out the appropriate documentation in order to submit their plans moving forward to the IHSA Executive Committee. But that is after they've had discussions with their region member schools, and by a majority vote, the region will determine the best plan for the season moving forward, not just the regional presidents. We really are encouraging dialogue. We're encouraging lots of communication between the regional presidents and all of the coaches in the region. It's going to take a lot of thinking outside of the box, I think, in order to be able to bring this forward. But yes, this is something that needs a majority vote of the coaches in the region in order for that to move forward. The next question: will riders be compensated for the membership dues they lost out on in the spring semester of 2020? That is a no. The riders pay for, when you pay membership into the IHSA, you pay for the year, not the semester. Even riders that would come in to compete just in the spring semester, that it's an annual membership. And so, it's not, I didn't get to show in one show, two shows. The vast majority of regions completed their regular season competition, with the exception of just a few regions, and many actually got through their region championship. So there will not be a refund of membership dues for the spring of 2020. Has IHSA considered moving Western semifinals to later in March or into April to allow for more time to get more shows, especially if the fall semester is canceled in the region? We usually have February and then regionals the beginning of March to allow time to coordinate travel to semifinals. This is something that has been discussed, pushing any and all of the postseason dates back a little bit to accommodate, to allow for the ability to host more competitions. But again, no definitive answers, no decisions have been made along these lines. There still is so much uncertainty in what our fall and spring semester are going to look like. Again, we are trying to be as positive and proactive about things as we possibly can. We're trying to maintain enthusiasm to and have the vision that we are going to be able to have a regular season that, as Kelly indicated at the beginning of the webinar, could look is going to look very different than any season that we've seen thus far. But these are all questions that we will be spending lots and lots of time discussing, especially as we progress through the fall semester and into spring, recognizing that any of these decisions need to be made sooner rather than later in order to allow people the opportunity to make their plans, their travel plans.
I do know that about the Western semifinal host locations have remained the same. So the ones that were supposed to be this spring will be the same for next year, I believe, at this point. But we will certainly raise this question with the Western Committee as they're planning going forward. But that was the intent. It was going to be the same hosts that were supposed to be in 2020. Okay. So it looks like there's quite a few questions asking if there will be spectators allowed at competitions, will entries be limited, the fact that a lot of them horse shows may be held indoors, and how is that going to be handled? I would probably ask you to refer first to the IHSA COVID-19 best practices document. We talk about, that yes, limited horse shows gets less people there, not having spectators there. Those are the best ways to limit the size of those gatherings. Also being aware of what's allowed within your state, by your institution. So I think that's going to be very individual depending on where your school is able to compete, those questions. But based on what we're seeing at the USEF and the USHJA shows, I would expect the spectators to be significantly limited and to try and hold as many horse shows outside as possible. But again, look to those protocols and best practices as well as what's happening in your area. These other. So there's a question about virtual horse shows. We are in the process of evaluating 2 different platforms to offer IHSA virtual horse shows. We know this could be an option for teams that may be able to practice but can't travel to compete. We hope to have those announcements within the next 2 weeks. And as giving an option to schools and a way to keep your students engaged. Go through, see there's some insurance questions, which I think we'll have to address with our insurance carrier on covering COVID liability for coaches and home barns and whether there's an additional insurance waiver. I don't have an answer at this point, but that's something that we can certainly follow up. Asking when exactly will we know if you'll have a competition season or not? It really depends on what's happening in your region. So again, reach out to your regional presidents. We are trying to stay as flexible as possible. So if that means that just a couple schools can play in the fall or just play in the spring, then that may be what happens. So please reach out. Your regional presidents are working hard. If you feel like you're not getting those answers, then I encourage you to reach out to members of the board. Our contact information is on the website and we can help facilitate that. So it's really going to depend on your region. I can only speak from where I am. I'm in New Jersey, and most of the schools in our area are going online in the fall. So we're looking at a spring semester. We hope we can resume and have competitions then. It's different in different parts of the country.
So Kelly, there's some questions about the virtual horse shows, and as opportunity, and so whether they would count for points or they just for fun. If we compete virtually one semester and in person next, will the point riders get virtually carried over and count? Those sort of questions. I know you're kind of taking the charge, I think, a little bit on the virtual stuff. Do you want to speak to that?
So again, this is still preliminary, but the virtual horse shows is not going to be in place of the regular IHSA horse show. So that is not going to count as an actual IHSA horse show in the sense of what we think of a horse show. It should not affect your eligibility. Depending on the participation level, we may have some year-end type honors for those students and teams that choose to participate in virtual, but it will not affect your, doesn't affect your eligibility. It is not considered a regular IHSA horse show. But again, there'll be full details on that once we release that out to all of you. So there is a question that said, given that the IHSA is based on fair play, wouldn't it be fair just to cancel the whole season since so many won't be able to compete? So this is we've wanted to really make sure that the club, we know that there's a lot of programs that want to stay connected with us, and we didn't want to penalize any school that was able to compete. We know it's going to be a season that has an asterisk next to it because of the level of participation that's going to be so different from what we've seen in the past. But we want to make sure our schools and our members keep a connection to the IHSA, and whether that's you can only practice and you do the virtual horse shows and our horsemanship challenge, or maybe you can do 2 or 3 horse shows in the spring, and that's just what the season looks like. We're just trying to make sure that, and we're going to look at those eligibility questions that are very valid questions to make sure that we are being fair to everybody in the association. But we don't want to impede any team that is still able to compete and still active in some fashion. We want to maintain that connection with our membership. So that's really why I know that question has come up a couple times, but we really think there's enough schools that want to stay connected with us this year. So we're doing our best to come up with some options for those schools. Just running through these questions.
If COVID continues to spike, we'll be canceling the balance of the season, and if so, will memberships be refunded? As I've said on a couple of the different webinars that I've been on lately, if you had asked me in March when things started to close because of the uptick in cases, I would not have envisioned that we would be seeing so many schools that are not competing this fall, that are limiting travel, that are that are making decisions to have virtual only classes and not be bringing students back to campus. There are so many variables that that factor into these decisions being made, and again, as members of this board, we value our membership, we value the member schools, we value the individual coaches and students, and we want to be as fair and equitable with everyone as we possibly can. And so yeah, I don't know the answer to that question right now because I don't know what this year is going to look like yet. We still haven't gotten into this year. So stay tuned. Again, any of these decisions are going to be made with everyone's best interest in mind, with the safety of our membership being paramount. We already talked a little bit about eligibility. There was one question about either the beginner horsemanship or the introductory hunter seat riders, if they are unable to compete this year, if we would adjust their 2-year maximum time at that level, and that eligibility is one of the questions that our group is going to be looking at. Again, we will try to make the best decisions for the group that we possibly can, but I don't have an answer to that question right now. Do you see anything else that's jumping out at you that we should?
I know there's quite a few questions about membership fees, and would they be, why would a school join if there's just virtual? I think the schools have to decide what is best for them. We fully recognize that you may wait to join until you know what kind of season there might be for the spring. We are also going to try and put together as many opportunities that in place of those regular horse shows to keep for your students. So please stay tuned for that. We're, like I said, our goal is to keep our membership as engaged as possible over the coming year. So we're, kind of stay tuned on that. We're doing our best to, provide those opportunities. I don't know. I know we're coming up to almost 45 minutes. I know we were going to plan to wrap up then. Any other questions?
Hang on 2 seconds. Cricket's been texting me a couple things.
Okay.
Question for me. Will ranch riding be available to open, will ranch riding only be available to open level riders?
No. So again, that'll come out. That information will be coming out through the press release. I believe it's that you have to be at least of a level 2 rider, but you can be an open horsemanship rider and also compete in that ranch riding class. But again, look for it. We'll get those details will be coming out. That will also be a class that obviously we won't be lowering the points. That's not available to lower the points for, because that's a brand new division, and it's one that you have to be at least that level 2 rider to qualify into.
The next question, is there a possibility that the region champions in open division last year be able to compete in Cashion next year? We answered that as far as just regional qualifiers for individual classes earlier, and the decision has been made again to not bring those riders forward from 2020 to the postseason competition of 2021. So one of the things that Kelly was, one of the questions that Kelly answered earlier was, why would the school pay a membership fee if we're only going to participate in virtual horse shows? We have tried our best to put into place the opportunity for schools in a variety of situations to be able to have competition. And one of the big reasons that we want to be able to do that is to provide opportunities for our students, especially the seniors this year who have unfortunately, this is their last year to be able to participate. And so we really want to be able to give them the chance, if at all possible. And so if we say right now that we're going to just draw a line through 2020 and say we're not going to do this anymore, we'll see you guys again on the flip side in the fall of 2021 and see if this will be a better year. We feel like that would be a real disservice to the students who have the ability to compete this year. We remain cautiously optimistic that as we follow our best practices and protocols and everyone does their part to minimize the spread of this disease, and as we have vaccines become available, that all of a sudden we're going to be able to participate a lot more normally, a lot more like what we would have anticipated this year to look like, and be able to have a season that we can come forward from and have postseason competition and keep everybody safe. But again, there's a lot of time between now and then for us to see how things transpire.
So I think we have addressed the majority of the questions. I know we're up at about 45 minutes. Should you have any additional questions, please feel free to, you can post them through our Facebook page. You can post them through the contact us on the IHSAinc.com. You can also find contact information for Sherry and for myself and other members of the executive committee, and we'll be happy to either direct them to the appropriate person or answer them ourselves. Again, just as a reminder, please get, as coaches and as captains, please get connected with your regional presidents. They're the ones that are collecting the information at the local level and are working to put together the best option that that region can. I know it's, like I said, it's not going to be a year like any other that we've seen in the intercollegiate. What we can promise you is the executive committee is working hard to make sure that we provide opportunity and for our members. And if you can horse show, we're going to do our best to try and find a way to make that happen. I want to thank Sherry for answering questions for me and with me here. And again, this has been recorded, so we'll make that available if you know anybody else that would like to listen to the information. And again, please stay connected with us, follow us on social media, definitely look and listen and expect to see more announcements come out from the IHSA for the upcoming fall season. So, but I thank you, or the upcoming 2020-2021 season. So I thank you all for taking the time to participate today, and hopefully look to see you in the ring with your students. All right, have a good day.
Thanks, guys.